Alright, welcome back to my boss build series, and I am on the second encounter of Warlord's Ruin, the new dungeon. And unlike my first encounter where I used Strand Titan, I decided to go with Sunbreaker on this one. Normally in the past I've kind of stayed away from using Solar Titan on dungeons just because of how broken it and easy it was with the infinite throwing hammer. Now at least there's a 1.4 second delay. This is a single loadout build that I'm using for this encounter, and the purpose for this build specifically isn't to do anything crazy like solo 2 phase or solo 3 phase, even the boss. My artifact level is not quite up there. I don't have solo operative. And I wanted to do something that was focused around survivability, and then that way I think that if you're an average player or maybe even a little bit below average, this would be a good build to take into this encounter, because it is a very long encounter. There's a lot of setup. Surviving can be quite difficult, and having something like Loreley Splendor to save your hide whenever you get critical on health is pretty invaluable. Are there better Solar Titan exotics to use for damage and even certain types of gameplay? Yes. Actually, we have a good variety of Solar exotics now that we can use. That are all quite good. Syntheseps are still good. Worm God Caress is really good. Precious Scars will give you restoration on solar weapon kills. Even Ashen Wake with the fusion grenades is really good for ad clear. But this is more focused on surviving without having to think about it. Which I never really thought I would be using Loreley Splendor in a dungeon encounter. But here I am, and maybe that's slightly inspired by the ornament in the store, in the Eververse store, which I think you could probably get it for free with Bright Dust at some point in the future, but sick looking ornament, and yeah, and the build just ended up working out for this. So as far as the aspects and fragments go, I'm using Roaring Flames, obviously, and Sol Invictus. And then I'm using Ember of Torches for Radiant, and I'm using Ember of Singeing, so that anytime I scorch targets with my hammer or fusion grenades or sunspots, I should say, I get my class ability energy back very fast, which I'm running a Rally Barricade for the shorter cooldown. And then that means that when I get critical, I'm more likely to have my barricade ready to drop me a sunspot, basically automatically, without even having to think about it. So Ember of Singeing comes into play there. I'm also using Ember of Solace and Ember of Ashes. So I'm not using Ember of Empyrean here because there's no point. I'm using Wish Ender for my kind of bread and butter setup for ad clear, killing the Minotaurs, killing the turrets. So I'm not using a solar weapon to refresh Restoration and Radiant, so I don't need Ember of Empyrean. If I want Radiant and Restoration, I could just use my hammer. And although Ember of Empyrean works with solar ability kills to refresh those timers, it's kind of just a moot point, because you're going to refresh Radiant and Restoration on every solar hammer kill, on every sunspot that you enter. You're just going to be refreshing those abilities, right? So you don't need Ember of Empyrean, which means that I can run Ember of Singeing to get my class ability back faster, which is not something I would run on other Titan builds. But yeah, so Solace is going to be better for extending. It's going to give me a longer duration of Radiant and Restoration. 50% longer, I think, to be exact. So instead of getting like 8 seconds of radiant, I'll have 12. And then I'll have longer duration for restoration as well. As far as the weapons go here, this is, well, I'm using Wish Ender. So I originally was doing some runs with Sunshot and Riptide for my fusion rifle, but I decided I wanted to go with 2 solar weapons for damage, you know, from a rocket for primary damage, and then a special for backup damage. So it meant that I had to go with something in my primary slot that would be good at ad clear that wasn't solar, which is, so I'm using Wish Ender. And Wish Ender actually has some bonuses when it comes to Taken. I don't know if it does additional damage. I've heard some people say that Wish Ender does do more damage to Taken enemies, but I do know that the anti-Taken fletching, I think, is the perk on Wish Ender. It gives you better accuracy versus Taken. So I'll talk more about Wish Ender after this damage phase. On the I decide before I even start damage where I am going to finish, because I'm going to finish damage on the plate that has the most heavy bricks. And I always start at the front 2 plates because that is going to allow me to go diagonally crisscross on every single plate. If I start at the front, then I can go diagonally to the back. And then I can go straight across to the other one at the back, which is far away. See, like I just did there. And then I can go diagonally across back to the last front plate, which is going to have some heavy bricks waiting for me. And I pop super on the second plate. I use my fusion grenade on the first plate, and I use my hammer wherever I can without having to waste it. So I'll try to use my hammer on some red bars in between each plate, and then I can use my fusion grenade on the boss to proc Revitalizing Blast. So for a first damage phase, this is pretty good. That is more than a quarter, so that tells me that a solo 4 phase should be fairly easy as long as I don't screw up my damage phases too much. And I think a 4 phase is solid if you're fairly low level and you don't have all the artifact perks unlocked. I think if a solo 4 phase is good. This is, I mean, ideally, towards the end of the season, if you're a higher level and you have all the artifacts unlocked and everything like that, I think a solo 3 phase would be something more reasonable to aim for if you're doing this solo. But even if you're not doing it solo, like the builds that I'm experimenting with here are designed, like I come up with them in solo content, but they're also something that I can carry forward into a team setting, so I can either farm this encounter with teammates, or just do like a fresh dungeon run with teammates just to get it done, and get some loot and whatnot. So what it means that though is that if I can solo 4 phase the boss, it means that if there's 3 of us, if there's 3 people instead of just me, that's a guaranteed 2 phase, right? Because it's going to be 3 times less long. Like technically, if everybody was doing optimal damage, right? So same goes, like if I could solo 2 phase the first boss with Strand Titan, well then solo like a team 1 phase should be just free. And a lot of that comes down to RNG, depending on who your teammates are, what they're doing for damage, and communication or lack of communication. But this is a build that offers survivability and fair damage. Is it the best damage? No, but it is definitely fair. Anytime you have to 5 phase or 6 phase a boss, it does not feel good. It doesn't feel fun. It takes too long, and especially with this encounter, as far as solo goes, this is like Samuma, where it takes like 8 minutes to set up in between each damage phase, and you gotta farm up enough ammo. So it's very tedious. So, and with all the different enemies and everything, I just thought it would be good to come up with a build that anybody can use without having to worry too much about like swapping weapons and damage rotations and proccing bait and switch, or trying to get surrounded, or using navigator and then swapping to tractor cannon. Like, this is just one build, one loadout, no swaps. Nothing intricate as far as proccing and damage perks. I'm simply using BIPOD and reconstruction on Apex Predator, which I haven't talked about yet, but before I went over that damage phase there, I was talking about Wish Ender. So Wish Ender, as you can see so far from this gameplay, very good. Sunshot is also extremely effective, but Wish Ender is like equally effective, and even more so on the turrets. And yeah, so as far as a primary goes, if you need to run an exotic in your primary slot, Wish Ender is a good way to go. Then for my 2 main weapons that are going to be doing damage to the boss, Apex Predator and Royal Executioner. So BIPOD has been kind of a coming up perk for since last season or a couple seasons ago. I guess we got BIPOD with Ghosts of the Deep season of the Deep. Yeah, I think that's when we got BIPOD. And back then it was like there wasn't much point to using it, because it was, even though you get 2 rockets in the mag and you get more reserves, like you get a lot more rockets, each rocket was doing 40% less damage, so the trade-off wasn't worth it before. But in the season after that, in Season of the Wish, or Witch I should say, last season, they buffed BIPOD so that it now does 25% less damage than normal rockets, instead of 40%. And then with the total amount of reserves that you get, and having a minimum of 2 rockets in the mag at a time, which you can double with reconstruction, you can have 4 rockets at once. Well, now the total damage is, I think, greater than Apex Predator with bait and switch, because with bait and switch you can only get up to 9 rockets. And you're going to have to proc bait and switch at least twice for all those reserves, which means that at most you'll get like 7 rockets with 35% more damage. But with BIPOD and reconstruction, you have 14 rockets, and you have up to 4 rockets in the mag at once without having to reload. So it actually works out that I found that using BIPOD on this encounter, and believe me, I tried. I have an Apex Predator with reconstruction bait and switch. I have one with reconstruction surrounded, because you can also get surrounded in this encounter fairly easily on at least 2 of the plates. And then I have one with BIPOD, and I even tried a Cold Comfort as well, and this Apex Predator was giving me the best results with BIPOD. And the reason for that is because, like I said, BIPOD is about total damage and ease of use. It's not about maximum DPS or burst damage. This is a long-ass fight. Each damage phase takes, it's about a minute worth of damage that you have to do, and the whole phase takes about a minute and a half. Like, you know, when you account for your travel time in between each plate. So yeah, you're gonna have a long time to figure out how to do damage, because I'm telling you right now, if you have just a standard rocket launcher with bait and switch, then you're not going to be using the rocket on every plate. or if you are, it's just going to be to fire like maybe 2-3 rockets and then switch to a special and a primary and do some damage with those, and then switch back to your rocket. So you're really not you're not really benefiting any, because I could tell you, even if you're using BIPOD with 14 rockets, you're still going to run out of rockets, and then you're still going to have to use a backup weapon to do damage, especially if there's no heavy bricks on the ground. But I try to prep before I start each damage phase. I try to prep to make sure, A, that I have rockets already, like I'm full. I have 14 rockets good to go in my rocket launcher, in my reserves. So here I am starting damage. I make sure that I've got Roaring Flames ×3 before I get to this plate, so I just refresh it off of a Scorn, get to the pillar, dunk the orb, get Radiant off of one of these thralls, and then throw my Fusion Grenade to get Revitalizing Blast and do 15% more damage to the boss that is now weakened. And then I dump as many rockets as I can, and then on the second plate, I go to pop my super. So I'm trying to keep the uptime on Roaring Flames in between the first plate and this plate. So it just means that I need to kind of micromanage killing a few adds every few seconds in between each plate, so that I can have that uptime on Roaring Flames, because that's going to increase my total super damage, which is key, because if you can debuff the boss from your super, it's already going to do 15% more damage. And I'm using the artifact mod, Heart of the Flame, and I'm not sure if it actually works. But what Heart of the Flame says that it does is, while you're radiant, you and your teammates do more super damage, or something like that. So I don't know if it works for me solo, or if it only works if I have teammates. But either way, I'm using the artifact mod, and I figured it would just be, it doesn't hurt anything to get radiant before popping my super, and I'm just automatically doing it anyways by, trying to maintain the uptime on Roaring Flames. But the reason that I popped my super on the second plate and not the first plate is because I want to throw my Fusion Grenade at the first plate, so that my Fusion Grenade can start recharging right away. So that way I can potentially have 3 Fusion Grenades for the whole damage phase. I will have at least 2, but possibly 3. Most likely 3. If I pop my super on the first plate, then it means that I'm throwing my Fusion Grenade on the second plate. Right, because I just need to put one ability on the boss. One solar ability on the boss is going to proc Revitalizing Blast for that 15% weaken. That's the purpose of using your abilities. So use Fusion Grenade on the first plate. That way it starts recharging. Use super on the second plate. The boss is weakened for the entire super. Then on the third plate, I probably have my Fusion Grenade back, because I've been sitting in a sunspot with my super the entire time. So I can throw my Fusion Grenade at the third plate. So now the boss has been weakened on all 3 plates. Then when I go to the fourth plate, if I don't have my Fusion Grenade back, then I can Hail Mary my throwing hammer and just forget about it, right? Because I don't want to use my hammer on every plate, because the boss is going to be a little bit far away from me, which means that I would have to run out of the plate to go and get my hammer back, and then come back to the plate to do damage. Because if I just fire and forget my hammer, like on the first or second or third plate, well, then I'm not going to be radiant for the plates thereafter, right? I'm going to be stuck waiting for my hammer, which is totally going to screw up your damage, because then you're going to have 25% less damage because you don't have radiant. And you might not be able to get weakened on the boss. So prioritize your Fusion Grenades and your super as your means for debuffing the boss, and then your hammer is only used to debuff the boss on the very last plate when you don't need your hammer anymore. But yeah, oftentimes when I get to the final plate, like I even have a third fusion grenade ready to go. Right. So yeah, that's pretty much the damage rotation. Usually if I can have at least 1 or 2 heavy ammo bricks on the ground next to one of those plates, then I'll have enough rockets to, like, you know, to do a good amount of damage to ensure the 4 phase. On that last damage phase, I actually did pretty poor damage there, but like I'm still at half total. So I figured I'm just going to keep going because the next 2 damage phases should be better anyways. But yeah, that's the basic strategy. As far as the combat mods go that I'm using here, and I'll talk about the mechanics of this encounter as well. But as far as the mods go, because I'm on Solar Titan on LORELEY Splendor, like you can get away with triple solar weapon surge mods on your legs without having to use recuperation or anything like that, because your LORELEY is just gonna do the healing work for you, and then you could just make sure that you always have 22% more damage. Double time dilation, so I get 18 seconds of armor charge per stack, so up to like a total of almost a minute. And I'm getting orbs from heavy-handed and kinetic siphon, so even during damage phase, if I were to run out of armor charge, like it would be very easy for me to just bonk an acolyte, and then boom, I've got armor charge again for the next plate. So not a big deal there. Harmonic loader and harmonic targeting, so faster aim down sight time, faster reload speed on my rocket launcher. And as far as resist mods, I'm just using 1 copy of Concussive Dampener because, again, I'm on Solar Titan with LORELEY Splendor. So I can get away with things that I wouldn't be able to get away with necessarily on other builds, right? Because I could bank on getting restoration from LORELEY Splendor. So just 1 Concussive Dampener was good enough, but if you're not using 2 Solar Reserve mods on your chest like I am, then you could probably just go with Concussive and Arc and maybe Void or double Arc, because all the taken enemies and the turrets do arc damage, and the Scorn do void damage, so you could do that, but I don't think it's worth it. I think it's more worth it to have 14 rockets at once. So yeah, so that's what I did there. Another point too about using LORELEY Splendor is it means that I don't need to use a healing grenade, right? So LORELEY Splendor is not really about like it's not really about stacking all kinds of ways to heal, is like making yourself unkillable in a way that's like overkill. You should be using something like LORELEY Splendor as a way to free up other aspects of your build, right? LORELEY Splendor is going to do the healing for you, which means that damage resist mods aren't as essential. It means that orb mods like recuperation and better already aren't as essential. It means that a healing grenade is not as essential. So what this means is you can really optimize like your damage and your ammo economy instead via triple solar weapon surge mods, via reserve mods, etc. Right? So another thing here that I do at the second plate is I try to put myself in front of the pillar, because the boss is blasting you with his freaking blizzard storm pushback, And if you're at the back of the pillar, like, he can send you flying off the circle, and then you have to get back in, right? And if you notice there, the boss just ran at me like an unstoppable ogre. It's because if you get to a threshold, I think it's probably about 30%. When the boss has about 30% of his HP left, start paying attention, because he will straight up sprint at you to every single plate. Yeah, so for the last damage phase, or last two, he gets very aggressive. This was my best damage phase. It picked up extra rockets, and my timing was on point. Yeah, so here we go. Start prepping for the last damage phase, and so in between each damage phase, it's the same. It's the same as the start, with the exception at the start is you shoot the blight in the middle of the map. But at the start of each pre-damage phase, it's the exact same. So you have the turret spawn, and then 2 packs of Taken spawn kind of at the back of the map. And there's going to be Taken Acolytes, and there's going to be a Taken Minotaur. Let's see this guy right here. So priority 1 is to take out enough turrets so that they're not spamming you. You can take out at least half of them, and if you can, just take out all but one, right? That is your end goal, basically, is to leave all but one up until you're ready to spawn in the mini boss scorns. But in the meantime, what you want to do is, like I said, you want to take away as many of those turrets as you can so that's safe. Then kill the Minotaurs, because they are a pain in the ass, and they will they can end your run for you. So just get rid of them. Take out as many Taken Acolytes as you can all the time, because they keep respawning. So it's just whenever they spawn, just take them out whenever it's convenient for you to do so, until you're ready to do damage, because that is going to spawn heavy bricks down there, and then you can basically keep an eye on where you're getting heavy bricks. And then when you have, for me personally, when I have all of my abilities, so if I have my fusion grenade and my hammer, and ideally my barricade, then I will shoot the last turret, spawn in that mini boss. Often I will put my barricade down where he spawns, so that he's going to spawn into a sunspot and start getting scorched. Then I can bonk him with my hammer, and I can throw a fusion grenade, and then with the fusion grenade and the sunspot, there's going to be enough scorch damage to ignite the mini boss, and then I could pretty much just wish ender it to death. But what you want to do is you don't want to kill it too fast. You want to get it weak, and then you want to wait for the mini boss to put down its first Taken turret, because if you kill the boss before it puts down a turret, then when it dies, you're only going to get one turret, which isn't a huge deal. But if you want to speed up the time in between these damage phases, then try and spawn 2 turrets at once, because you have enough time to expire both those turrets and get 2 solar orbs instead of 1, right? So if you didn't know, like, the mechanic, it's kind of like the first boss. When the Scorn mini boss spawns in the turret, instantly there's going to be a blizzard, and you're just going to start getting biting cold. And when biting cold starts to set in, you have to pay attention, because if you get biting cold times 10, like you can see right now, I have times 3, times 4, times 5. When you get to times 8, well, you're kind of in an emergency, because when it gets to times 9, you're going to be slowed, and then when it gets to 10, you're dead. So I've died like without paying attention a couple times from that. But basically what it means, during that blizzard phase, that's when the Taken turrets are down, and you can capture if you can kill the mini boss like as soon as he puts down one turret, then the second turret is going to overlap the first turret, and you can capture both of them at the same time. And you have enough time to capture them before going to make your way over to a torch to get rid of the biting cold stacks. But even if you can't get two at once, like in, you know, if they're not like overlapping, say they're spaced out a little bit, you still have enough time to get one, go to a torch, get the cold stacks off. It takes like a second for the cold stacks to come off. You still have enough time to run back over to the second totem and expire that one, and then make it back to the flame, and then Imminent Wish is over at that point. And then, you know, if you do it correctly, then you're going to have 2 solar orbs that spawn. So it just means that now you just have to kill one more mini boss Scorn to get 2 more orbs. And then you're prepped to start lighting the pillars and figure out where you're going to do damage from. Yeah, and then, so like I said, it's really just about, at that point, once you have those 4 orbs, you see I've got 1 taken turret up the entire time, just because there's no point in destroying it. If I destroy the taken turret, then the mini bosses are going to spawn in again. I don't want that. So I just keep 1 turret up, that way it's not a threat to me, and that way I'm not spawning in adds unnecessarily. Yeah, and then it's just damage, and like I said, he gets very aggressive here at the end. Even when you're setting up, like going to light the pillars before damage phase, the boss is going to chase you, so you got to be really careful of that. So this is my last damage plate, because you can see all the heavy bricks I have there, so it means that I'm going to do the front left plate as my first damage plate, and then I'm going to go diagonally, and I almost get sent off the map there. I hate the right side of the map. I've seen some people do this from the right side of the map, but anytime I do stuff on the right side and I transition back into the middle, it's very easy to get blown off. It's more easy to get blown off than this side right here. But yeah, so I'm going to start at the front left, because I don't have very much heavy there. I have heavy on front right. So I want to end at front right, because I'm going to have less ammo then. Start here, then I'm going to move diagonally to the back right, and then I'm going to go back left, and then I'm going to go front right. And if you get too many taken enemies that are pushing you while you're trying to do rocket damage, don't be afraid to jump shot a little bit. Look at the boss right up on me there. So it's kind of a good thing that I had planned to do my super on the second plate, because I definitely did not realize that he was going to be that close to me. So I threw my hammer there, make sure I go and get it. Royal Executioner here, every single shot that I need to use it for is going to have Reservoir Burst. Here's the last plate, and he almost sends me flying off, but we get it. So there it is, solo 4 phase, and if you do it optimally at my level at 1817, you could do it in like 3.5 phases, but you know, still, it's 4 phases really. But yeah, Royal Executioner is really good here because it's an adaptive frame, so it's a little faster fire rate than Eremite. I tried using Eremite here, but controlled burst is not really beneficial, because anytime that you have to switch weapons, reload, well, I mean, you shouldn't reload with Envious Assassin, but anytime you need to throw a grenade or throw your hammer, well, you're going to have to restart controlled burst all over again, because controlled burst is only good for consistent, constant shooting. If you stop shooting for even a second, you have to reproc controlled burst, which means that you're wasting its potential. But with Royal Executioner, you can have every single shot have reservoir burst. So every shot, no matter when you shoot it, it's going to be 20% more damage. And I'm definitely not going through all my fusion rifle ammo, so that's why I'm saying every shot is reservoir burst when I need it. Anyways, that's it for the video. Hope you enjoyed. Check out the live stream. See you in the next one.